All right, the recording has begun. So, uh, I've begun the recording of the meeting. Let's call the meeting to order. It's Friday, April the 17th at 1:06 p.m. And I believe that we have a quorum present. You all have the agenda. First item is approval of the minutes of our last meeting from April the 3rd. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved. Francom.
Seconder? I don't know if we need a second, but just in case.
Second, Myrna Garcia Bowen.
Okay. You have the minutes are in front of you. I can screen share them just in case you don't have it. Here's the minutes. There are 3 pages of them. They look extremely complete to me. Is there any discussion on the minutes? In the absence of discussion, all those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
This is Jen Long. I just wanted to tell you that I'm listed under MCC instead of TRCC.
We've done that before, haven't we? Where is that?
So
Okay.
under present on the right, I'm
Yeah.
the first one, and I'm the I'm from TRCC, but am I the alternate from MCC, or is that listing me as where I'm from?
No, yeah, that's listening where, so I'll put your Three Rivers.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, I couldn't get my mic turned back on.
No, that's all right, but we'll call this a,
Well, I knew I had gotten some of these things wrong, so thank you.
it's hard to keep track of all of this. Okay, well, we'll include that as a friendly amendment after actually having approved it. It would retroactive. Okay, let us then proceed to the agenda. And so the first item is a request from the Enrollment Management Crisis Team for us to advise, I guess, on a message of recommendations for faculty. I sent that out in the latest notice for the meeting, but I will try and get it up here online. I think it's right here. Okay, Terry, do you want to go ahead and present this?
Yeah, sure. Hi, my name is Terry Ramonde, and I am working with Lee Appleby in the system office as part of a subgroup of the Enrollment Management Crisis Team. And what we're trying to do is work on a communication strategy to students to encourage them to continue their education in the fall, let them know that we're open for business, please enroll. And we really need your feedback and suggestions on this message that will go out from your campus leaders to faculty. And we really appreciate your feedback. Hopefully you've all had a chance to take a look at this message. So that's why I'm here to talk to you, and hopefully you can help guide us to, a really good message to send out to students to encourage them to enroll in the fall.
And this is intended for the community college students, is that correct?
Yes, I'm sorry, yes. It's specifically for the community college students. And the message will come out from your campus leaders to faculty, to students.
All right, comments?
I'm sorry, could you could I, this is Lois, I'm not understanding what's going on here. This is coming from from our campus leader to our faculty, and these are comments that we should be making to students?
No, I'm sorry. The whole, the whole point is to try to get students to enroll and register in the fall. So we really want consistent language and unified language across the system in terms of messaging. So this letter that's going to faculty, it's going to faculty from your campus leaders, and we really just want to make sure the messaging is correct in this letter.
I'm
This is
still
Fran-
not sure I understand what this is.
So it,
Yeah, can I ask about the membership of the team? Are the campus leaders part of this group that drafted this?
Actually,
Sorry, that was Kalina.
Gail Barrett and Lee worked together to draft this message for right now, and we're presenting it to you because we'd like to send it to faculty in the coming days. So hopefully, are these messages, have you guys taken a look at this at all?
Hi, this is Jen Long. I read this document. My understanding is that this is what we would basically copy.
Right.
Correct? I mean, my
Yeah.
just initial feedback is that the language is a little bit formal, and it would
Okay.
maybe seem a little bit out of context to the body of the email I might send, just in certain areas.
Okay.
So could we write something like, these are recommendations for email communication? These are recommendations for email communication to be used loosely, or do you want us to literally cut and paste? Because I teach developmental, so for example, some of my students would have a hard time reading some of these bullets, but I have a unique population. So that's just my initial feedback.
No, that would be great if you want to cut and paste what you think would work for your students.
This is Ron Picard from Naugatuck Valley Community College. The biggest issue that my students are having is that they want to know with certainty whether the fall is going to be online or traditional. I don't think any message we send to them is going to convince them to register before they know for certain whether or not the courses are going to be online or traditional. Most of my students who, especially at the 100 level and the developmental level, most of them do not do well in an online environment, and they do not want to take online courses. I can't tell you how many students have contacted me and told me that they're unable to finish the course due to the online nature of the course. And so they're not going to register until they know for sure it's going to be on ground. And so I think that decision needs to be made first. That's all. That's my recommendation.
Okay. Okay. Is there anything else?
well,
Hi,
back
this
to,
is-
go ahead. Fran Tunks is back to Kalena's point. I think if the campus leaders are going to put their signature to this, I think at a minimum, they need to agree to it. And quite frankly, they should be taking this back to faculty for discussion before anything's.
Right. Okay.
Because ultimately faculty are going to end up working with these students. That's going to be the key part to this, if we're going to retain them or not. But to Ron's point, we need to know what's going on before we can advise these students, and we don't.
I know.
One of the points that was made at the Board of Regents meeting yesterday by Rich Balducci from the Finance and Infrastructure Committee was that there was going to be some accommodation for students who have difficulty paying. And given that many students are not going to be able to work this summer, and their parents may not be working, or their their partners or siblings or whatever. I think it would be important to mention the accommodation that is being made. There are students, from what I understood, from what Rich Balducci said, students with up to $1,200 owing could be nonetheless registered on condition that they set up a payment plan, and that could be modified in particular cases by the CFO, I presume, of each institution.
Okay.
I think it would be a good idea to get the exact details, and you might want to get it from Rich Balducci to
Okay.
know exactly what, because I think a lot of students, I mean, I agree with Ron's point. I know a lot of my students at the university level, that's the question they're asking. That's the question the faculty are asking. But they also, this financial situation, that should be mentioned as well.
Okay.
This is Mary Beth Rycheski from Nantucket, and a few of my students have made comments that, you know, if they're afraid that if they register for a class and then it turns out that classes are online, that they're going to lose out on their money. So maybe if there was something stated that if classes end up being online, students can choose to, you know, withdraw or, you know, without losing any of their money up, you know, beyond just what the normal date is, which I think is like the first day of classes, they basically already lost half of their money. So
Right.
something like that.
Yeah, I'm really glad to be talking to all of you because these are things that really do need to be included. Is there any other feedback that I could bring back to Lee and Gail?
This is Mary Beth again.
Lois, and
I was just going to comment, Jen had kind of stated this again, and I just wanted more clarity included in the letter as to whether these are supposed to be things that we're cutting and pasting, or if this is just kind of general guidelines of how we would say it. Because again, faculty might not use those exact wordings, but could still provide the same kind of messaging. So it needs to be clear in the letter if this is we have to use these exact words, or if this is just suggestions on things we could say to our students.
Could you put together some language that might be helpful and maybe email it to me? Do you have some points that you have written already that you might want to include, or?
I mean, I don't know that it's necessarily, I mean, I feel like every person would almost have like their own way of how they would say it to their own students, because everybody's population is a little bit different. So.
Right.
This is Colina, and I would very much urge against the cutting and pasting. I think
okay.
Students know us, right? The way that we're teachers. So the primary mode of we're communicators. They know us, and they know when it's not our voice. And I think getting something that's cut and pasted that isn't our voice makes it seem as if we're not there. So I think it might actually not quite, achieve the thing that you want to achieve, which is us kind of guiding them through this. So I think it's much better to ask people to craft these messages themselves. I don't think they're so complicated that we can screw them up.
I agree, Kalina.
Yeah, this is Dave Blitz. My impression from Terry was what the system office wants to do is to have the presidents or CEOs, or if sent out directly from the system office, I'm not quite sure, the same email to every student. Is that correct, Terry?
Yeah, yes, I think that was the initial plan.
This is Lois Amy from Norwalk, and I agree with Kalina, and I think these need to be, I don't know what this is supposed to be, but I think what we need to do is work individually with students and focus on their specific needs. These are just generalized statements that may or may not apply to the students, and I don't know why we wouldn't just be allowed to deal with our students because we know who they are and we know their issues.
Right.
This is Kalina. It might be more helpful to just give a list of the assurances that we can actually, because we don't actually know what we can promise at this point. Nobody really does, but at least give a list of the assurances that we can offer to students, whether it's you can withdraw if it turns out to be online, or that, resolution passed yesterday about the $1,200 that, if you owe up to $1,200, you can still register. Those sorts of things I think are really important for students to hear and for us to know that we can offer over and above these, they're assurances, but they're not substantive. Sorry, I don't mean it like that, but you know what I'm saying.
No, I know what you mean. No, I know what you mean.
I think as well, it's Dave Blitz here. There was also some discussion of a one-time extension of incompletes. I wasn't clear as to whether they meant incompletes from this term were being extended. I'm not quite sure what the policy is at community colleges,
Right.
or whether it was being extended or into the fall term as well. So I think that's something else to check into, because students will probably.
It's only fall and winter. Sorry, Kalina, again, it was only fall and winter, but it would be helpful to have that for this term also.
In other words, incompletes from the fall and winter, which would have been due at some point this term, have been extended. They didn't exactly say when, and I'm afraid I didn't think to ask them.
Okay.
But that's something that you want to find out about as well, because students who are not availing themselves of pass-fail and prefer to do an incomplete, or who had an incomplete from previous terms, would certainly want to know that, because that would also in part determine their eligibility for registering in the fall.
There's all these issues that need to be addressed.
Right. Are there other comments on this? Not. Let's proceed. Thank you, Harry. And let's proceed.
Right, thank you.
Let's proceed to the next item on the agenda, which is the Student Advisory Committee. Monica Molandano is here. Monica, do you want to take over?
Yes, hello, faculty committee. Thank you so much. Thank you, Chairman Blitz and Vice Chair Susan here for, and the faculty committee for allowing me and inviting me to participate in today's meeting. I do appreciate it. And I really appreciate all the work that everyone has done. Just to comment on the incomplete, I think those are very good questions. And I would hope that you all follow up, because that's actually something the Student Advisory Committee asked for, and that was from last fall and winter's sessions that would bring us out to be able to fulfill that for this semester. But I agree that to allow that to happen again for this current semester, to have an extended amount of time perhaps would be really good for students, because it is a really difficult time for many students and faculty during this transition. So thank you for bringing that up, and I do encourage you to follow up on that. I do have a very short report. It's a revision from what I presented to the board yesterday, and I just wanted to read that to the committee. So yesterday I had the opportunity to address the board and thank the CSCU system for their work and the transition to online learning. I am grateful to have the chance to thank you, the faculty, directly. Your collective efforts to make this a smooth and seamless transition was exceptional. I am inspired and encouraged by all you have accomplished. I want you to know that this year's mission of the Student Advisory Committee was to present the idea that the intent of the Students First initiative is an effort to unify our community colleges. As the chair, I promise to provide neutral information about Students First and the consolidation of our 12 campuses. I led with the understanding that our job as members of the committee was not to choose a side, but to bring concerns about Students First to the attention of the Board of Regents, and that is what we were able to accomplish. This academic year saw increased student involvement and had representation from each institution for the majority of our meetings. The Student Advisory Committee had direct access to President Ojakian and received firsthand knowledge of the inner workings of the Students First initiative. President Ojakian effectively delivered informative updates on the process of seeking accreditation as a single community college and kept us informed on the system's endeavors at the state capitol. His transparency was greatly appreciated. Our committee was able to observe the focus on student success with the goal to improve graduation and completion rates, advisement systems, and student learning outcomes. We were able to participate in the Students First Academic and Student Affairs Consolidation Committee, including the General Education, Guided Pathways, and Shared Governance work groups. We gained insight on the necessity for the system to pool our resources rather than stretching them thinly. We were able to communicate with our campuses on how Students First does this by sharing non-student facing services with deploying resources centrally, regionally, and locally in order to save money and improve quality overall. The Student Advisory Committee was able to engage on topics such as the Public Safety Task Force, the Pledge to Advance Connecticut, and the Guided Pathways Advising Model, just to name a few. We also had the privilege to hear from Presidential Fellow Dr. David Levinson, who patiently and intently addressed numerous questions and concerns regarding Students First. One major goal for me personally was to learn more about graduation metrics. And thanks to Bill Gamble of the Board of Regents, we learned about the computation metric concerning the graduation rate for first-time, full-time students. And I believe that it is critical for students to understand that there are other metrics to measure our success as students, including Student Achievement Measure, SAM, which is available on the Board of Regents website. Finally, I want to acknowledge that the board has been extremely receptive to student requests and concerns regarding the online transition. We saw many policy changes that foster student success, including the pass-fail option, which many students wanted, and in fact, were considering to petition for this before we took the lead and made communication with the Board of Regents about this request from students. And this is from all campuses. We asked for an extension on incomplete grades from the fall semester, which was just discussed. This was also voted and approved at yesterday's board meeting. We especially want to show our gratitude for our Campus Scholarship Foundations, which has offered an unprecedented amount of financial assistance to help our students, including many, many laptops. Every one of you was faced with a total unknown. This online transition was something that not one of you had any prior experience with, and still you did it, and students, thank you. So thank you very much for your commitment and your efforts, and I do appreciate your time. And of course, I want to, if there's any questions or anything, definitely want to engage with the faculty. It's something I actually wanted this whole academic year, so I'm glad to be here today. And again, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Monica. Discussion? Or questions?
Hi, Monica, it's Colina. So when I initially emailed you, I was wondering if there was anything that's sort of on your radar that we should be thinking about or considering. It sounds to me like you're very satisfied with where we are right now. Is there anything that's still to be resolved, something that we should be thinking about?
Thank you, Colina. I mean, everything that we have asked for has been given to us, and I have, I've done my due diligence to contact the leaders of the different campuses, and I haven't heard anything back from students. And I know that there's still communication going on, like at our campus, there's open forums for students to make these types of requests. I haven't seen anything come to my attention that we should bring to the Board of Regents. And so, yeah, I'm super impressed with everything currently in online lab classes that, of course, I'm missing the opportunity to work hands-on, but the level of transition that our professors have been able to still provide us with a sound education on these subject matters has been great. And I'm just really grateful. It's really, it's unfortunate that we all had to go through this, but it's not just us, it's the entire country. So, a lot of patience from our end has been exhibited. And so I'm really just impressed and grateful overall, and can't wait to get back to, some type of normalcy.
Great, thank you.
I had a question. which is a little bit different. I mean, one aspect of it is, of course, the transition to online, which is happening at the universities as well. And that is really a major effort on the part of faculty, but also students to adapt to a considerably changed environment. But I have a question. To what extent are the students that you're in contact with, the student leaders for the various campuses, to what extent is it an issue for them to be able to transfer from one community college to another um, as part of a unified or a single community college? Is that a big issue or is that a minor issue?
From what I have heard over the past couple of years, actually, because I've been involved with the Student Advisory Committee now for a couple of years, and the biggest concern initially was that some students may perhaps have failed out and they would have had the chance to kind of start over at another campus, and that's going to not be available to students. And I believe that the Guided Pathways initiative and investment to really advance our advising department so that we have a lot more advisors available for students to help them get through the year. And I mean, we see like at our campus at Gateway, the FEST program, and I know that's at other campuses where we have dedicated coaching staff to help get students through the year. And really just student leadership. I mean, I like to see more activity coming out of the student activities office to help encourage students and get them involved and just support them throughout the year, because we really do see a lot of parents, a lot of workers, a lot of different needs for our students that really kind of inhibit them from focusing totally on their schoolwork. So a lot of support in that area is really all we can do, and I think we see that mission with the Guided Pathways initiative. So I mean, other than not being able to start over at another campus, I haven't seen much downfall to that. Me personally, I did have I lost one of my classes that I may have been able to take at another campus, but I did not do that. I ended up having to take a much more elaborate class, but I'm actually better for it, and it was super challenging, and I'm really grateful for that opportunity, honestly, because I wouldn't have to take that course in biochemistry, and I've learned so much and really feel like it's a university level class, and so I don't personally feel that I lost out, and again, just supporting students and giving them what they need to get through the classes that they currently have is really what we need to see on campus from student leaders and faculty and advising as well.
Thank you.
David, this is John.
Excuse me. I just want to let you know it's Patrice. I'm on the phone.
Okay.
Thank you.
And David, this is Mike Shea. I'm also on the phone. Can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you now.
Thank you. I've been muted. I've been on for a while.
Your name has come up, so even though you're on the phone, you've gotten full recognition.
Thank you.
David, this is Jen Long. When you're sharing your screen, can we not see the people who are attendees? Can anyone help me figure out how to?
Yeah, I'm having trouble getting rid of that.
You can pin David Blitz. You can pin him with a little pin icon.
Okay. And also Christine Ruggiero has a comment when you get a chance. She's having trouble with her mic, but she wants to chime in.
Okay, could you do that now? Let me see.
Let me text her.
David, I'm here too. David Stoloff is here.
Gotcha.
I'm on my pad.
Yes, you've come. You're identified as well by name.
Thank you. I can't get you on my computer.
You know, some people have had trouble like that, and it varies from person to person.
Christine said never mind because she can't unmute her mic. She's been trying for a while, so she'll text me if something else comes up, but she said don't worry about it right now.
Okay. Are there other questions for Monica?
I think there was one that we didn't get. So I would ask, Monica, you and I, we kind of presented back to back yesterday, and there was quite a contrast, I think, in sort of content and tone. And so I was wondering if you had questions for us.
Thank you, Kalina. Yeah, I think the biggest thing was I just wanted to make sure that, it was known that students were actually considering a petition. I think they were following suit on other universities from Connecticut that had done that to request the pass fail. I personally am not going to take that option because I work hard enough and work towards my grades. But I do understand there's a large amount of our students that would benefit from something like that, especially having the difficulty of actually having the time to sit down and take on courses on their own. So that was like my biggest thing was this was something that the students were definitely driving from the very beginning. So I just wanted that to be known, and I appreciate so much, like, again, like I'm actually part of the shared governance work group that I know so many faculty have been recalled from, and I see how much people really do try to work together and make sure all voices are heard and represented. And I'm on multiple committees for the board as well as being a part of the board meeting. So this year, and again, this is not my first year being involved. It's just my first year being the chair. But it's been really incredible to see all the inner workings of things, and they're literally, listening to students. I didn't maybe have all of this. I didn't have that same feeling last year, and I thought it was really just a checkpoint to say that they had the students' voice. But this year was something different. I mean, everything that we had asked and everything that we offered as a suggestion was really taken into consideration, and I definitely had a different idea of everything. And I also just want to say, what we just saw this last month or two with this online transition, we really saw a collaborative effort for the entire CSCU system, and I just want to acknowledge that it's really been great to have everyone work together, and that it's not always just one side against the other. It's like, how do we take what we have and make the best out of it, and the best possible for both faculty, students, and administrators. So I just encourage everyone to really use this experience as a catalyst to really show that we're all on the same team here, and we all just want the best for each other. So I want to see, and I do see when, all of these committees that I'm involved with, I definitely see like this, collective effort to make sure that our system is successful and that students are successful. So yeah, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm really encouraged and inspired. I've learned so much this year from being a part of all of these board meetings, and watching you professionals to do your job. And I've learned so much and grown so much. So I really appreciate it.
Okay.
This is Barbara. If I could ask one more question, please. Could you explain to us, Monica, the timing? How do students get elected onto your committee? When does that happen? When will it change? And do you have any thoughts about how we could keep in better touch with your committee than we have in the past?
Yes, so last year I was a student government president for Gateway Community College, and so that was the beginning of like this entire I guess elevated level of professionalism from myself. And so I was involved with like the scholarship foundation board, and so I've met a lot of people, which is how I eventually met President Ojakian, and so just that level of involvement kind of just catapulted me to this level. I was a member of the student advisory committee, and so we meet once a month, every month, even throughout the summer, although some of those meetings are canceled because of lack of participation. But we will be holding elections very soon, and really it's an appointment from the student government. However, I'm discussing with the committee on how we can get it out to the broader college, because I think, you know, even possibly like a political science students or economic major may be interested in a position such as this. But it really, it only requires one representative from each campus. So it's a small committee. And then there's an alternate member from each campus in the case that that representative is not available. So there's two representatives from each campus. And it's really like the role is to bring back this information to the campuses so that it can be distributed amongst the student body. And that's done in the way of this student government meetings at each campus. So I would like to see, you know, this actually have a bigger, broader level of communication. And Professor Stasenko knows her and I have met several times just to keep the communication between what's going on the faculty end, what's going on the student end. And we've been able to really, I mean, I've been able to bring that kind of concerns or issues to the student advisory committee, where we again have access to President Ojakian, have been able to ask questions and really relay some of the concerns, because I know there sometimes you don't always have access to him. So I have been working with her this academic year to make sure, you know, those voices are heard. And I would have loved to have the chance to really come to these faculty advisory committee meetings a lot sooner, because I know there's, you know, still a divide. I mean, I've been, like I said, in the shared governance meetings, I've seen that firsthand. And I think, you know, what I wanted to do as, you know, taking this role was to make sure that we can at least communicate and that everyone was being heard. And so I hope I was able to do a little bit of that this year.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Student government is really the link to this. So I would talk to your student government leaders and make sure they have a student advisory member.
Thank you, Monica.
Thank you so much.
And you're invited to stay on as a invited guest. And in fact, members of the public can join the faculty advisory committee, as I believe they can join your committee, through the agenda. Okay, let's go on to the next point, which is the HSSR resolution on holistic case management advising policy. And you had that as an attachment. I'm going to see if I can put this up on screen sharing. This was brought up at the Board of Regents yesterday, and a resolution supporting this model was adopted by the board. Obviously, the faculty advisory committee members and the student advisory committee members are non-voting. And the issue also came up in the report from Richard Balducci, the chair of the Finance and Infrastructure Committee, who pointed out that a total of, I believe, $3 million had been put aside to hire 60 new advisors. Their goal being to reduce the advising load from 760 students per advisor to 250. So that was supplemental information in addition to what you have in this particular document. Discussion? I think it's here for discussion. It's already been approved by the Board of Regents, but nonetheless, it was brought to our attention that a number of people had some comments to make about it.
David, this is Ron Picard at Naugatuck Valley. This policy is actually worse for some of our students, for about half of our students. Half of our students currently have a 30-to-1 ratio for advisor to advisee, because faculty at our college who advise have a cap of 30 students who they advise. And so currently at our institution, at least for about half of our students, they have a 30-to-1 ratio. This is a 250-to-1 ratio. So this actually harms about half of our students. The other half, it probably does help them, because the remaining students are advised by professional advisors, and we could use more of them for sure to reduce that workload on the professional advisors. But in terms of faculty advising, right now we have a 30-to-1 ratio, and which is really, really good actually for our students. So I just wanted to get that out there.
This is Barbara. I have one, I don't know if it came up at the board meeting, but one of my concerns is that on our campus, there seems to be an attitude that anybody can be an advisor, and they have taken some people from other sorts of jobs and stuck them in as advisors. I don't know if there's been any discussion of what the qualifications would be of these advisors. What does professional mean?
There wasn't any discussion at the board meeting on that, no. And I'm looking through the document, and I'm not sure that is mentioned either in terms of professional qualifications. But I could be wrong. It's a rather lengthy document.
As you look, I'll mention that it was first brought up at the ASA meeting 2 weeks ago. And at that meeting, there was a lot of concern about whether we should even be approving programs at this point because we're so uncertain about the financial future, etc. So when this resolution came up right at the end, there was a sort of just at least a cautioning that, you know, yeah, sure, we're making this promise, but it depends on the financial future. But it was just an aside at that point. We had kind of gotten over the panic. And I am a little concerned that this is a wonderful aspiration, but it's done in a context of limited resources. And I wonder about sort of balancing it with commitments towards hiring full-time faculty or something like that.
Yeah, I'm hoping that sometime in this meeting we'll talk a little bit about the general financial situation inside higher ed, and things like that are in a panic about state budget cuts and things. And yes, the question is, what about money for faculty? Yeah.
Well, those are two questions. One, what are the professional qualifications which will be expected of the advisors? And number two, what are the plans by the board in terms of hiring of new faculty for the fall? And of course, there's a related issue, which is of those proposed 60 people, which was, I presume, the ideal, how many are being planned, how many are they planning to hire for the fall? As I recall the discussion, and it's here in the draft as well, under why we design academic advising, the figure of 15% of three-year complete graduation rate for first-time community college students was the number that was given as the baseline from which improvement has to be made. And I know that Monica was talking and mentioned something about the way in which this is calculated. And I know that for the universities, it's a somewhat strange calculation because we don't calculate in the success rate of students coming in from the community colleges. It's only first year from recent high school graduates, and transfers as well are not counted. So I wonder if that's an issue, the 15% number.
I think, and this is Ron again at Nogtick Valley. I think another issue that I just wanted to raise is that we found, in terms of our experience, that the best advising that the students get are from faculty advisors, and this plan seems to cut out faculty advising in favor of professional advisors. In our experience, and it may be due to the workload for the professional advisors, students tend to get incorrect information if they're not going directly to a faculty member, particularly since some of these programs requirements are so intricate that it's really the program coordinators and the program faculty that know it the best. And we often find that faculty need to encounter students who have been misadvised, and again, that's not a slight on the professional advisors, because they're working as hard as they can and their workloads are incredibly high, and that may be part of the problem. but we have found that faculty are the best advisors when it comes to students.
At Housatonic, we've had a major problem also with misadvising, especially because some people have been put in as advisors who that wasn't what they were trained for.
Are there other comments on this? I mean, there are some follow-up too.
Yeah, this is Lois Amy, and I agree completely with Ron about the fact that faculty, there are nuances to courses and prerequisites and so forth that people in student services at times don't fully understand, and the faculty member would understand that more completely. I've seen students be misadvised because of that.
Well, I think it connects with the faculty hiring issue, because if you don't have full-time faculty, you know what I mean.
Fran Cone, just more a philosophical point, but an important one. If this is a set of best practices, recommendations based on research and so on and so forth that can be interpreted locally according to the needs and wants of each college and each community, that would make sense. But what I fear is this will become a one-size-fits-all approach. And the problem with that is it's either going to work for everybody or it's going to work for nobody. And I'm very wary of that sort of approach.
Okay. Are there other comments? I'll just add we had exactly the same discussion at CCSU at the university when the administration proposed hiring in the next 10 years up to 24 additional professional advisors. And the whole question arose as to what's the relationship between the professional advisors and the faculty advisors being the ones with the intimate knowledge of the ins and outs of the programs, and also prospects for transfer, application for graduate work, and so forth. So this is certainly not a new issue, but definitely for follow-up question of what are the qualifications? What are the implications for the hiring of full-time faculty? Is this a reduction in the number of full-time faculty to make up for advisors? That 15% issue, which is the baseline, one size fits all. I think those are some of the issues that we want to follow up on. With that said, let's go on to the fifth item in the agenda, and that's report to and from the 16th, yesterday's meeting, Board of Regents meeting. I can say that finally, Chairman of the Board, Mr. Fleury, introduced both myself and Colina, or at least indicated that we are now ex officio non-voting members of the board representing the Faculty Advisory Committee. I made a very brief statement that there were two issues which we had brought up at the previous two meetings of the FAC, upon which Colina was going to make a report. And those were the questions of the resolutions that we had in support of faculty withdrawing from the consolidation committees, and also concerns about the premature announcement of the pass-fail policy without adequate consultation with faculty for the ins and outs and some of the intricacies that such a policy had to respect. Lena then presented the report, which you have here, and there it is online. Lena, do you want to add?
I'd say just that there were no questions, but this morning, I haven't had a chance to look at them yet. This morning I did get emails from, goodness, who were they from? I was CC'd on emails from Jane Gates to campus leaders to ensure, just confirming with them that they had shared the new pass-fail policy with faculty, and they are responding. And then there was another email sort of confirming who the membership of the shared governance group actually is at the moment, because I had mentioned how many people had withdrawn. I have to check that for accuracy. I think it is accurate. And both what they've sent me and what I said are both accurate. So Yeah, so there is some follow-up, and I guess I'll just forward that to you when it's finished, but there were no questions at the meeting. And I did want to also just mention a few things on the agenda that you guys might find interesting, just tell you where to find them. So there were new recommendations on grading notation, right, for compliance with Title IV. There was the new policy on incompletes for the winter and fall sessions of 2019, pushing them out to May 17th. That new org chart now has not confidential draft, but just draft on it. And that's there at page 141. No, sorry, at page 143. The payment modification plan is in there also, saying that students who have a balance of up to $1,200 can still register for courses. And there's a whole new structure from the Finance Committee about all the IR, HR, and so on structure. So the diagrams are there for you at 155. So
Yes, I'm trying to. Here we go.
yeah.
There we go.
The HSSR is at page 122. So
Okay.
if you,
So, I think as my impression, this is the first board meeting that I've attended other than as a member of the public making some critical comments from the microphone. Usually when we made those comments, in fact, always when we made those public comments, we got no response whatever from the board. And when we presented our report, that was a consistent reaction. There was no response. I asked if there were any questions, and there were none. However, I do think we made our position quite clear. And just to reiterate, we didn't discuss, or just to elaborate rather, we didn't discuss with them our overall objections to the restructuring, but that has to do with the levels of bureaucracy and all of these org charts with additional people being moved to the central office, whereas you have downgrading of administrative staff at the campus level. So those are issues I think we'll have to bring up with them at a later date. Kalina, you're now a member of the ASA committee, is that correct?
yes, that's right.
And I'm awaiting further information from the Finance and Infrastructure Committee. Sorry, somebody wanted to ask a question?
Yeah, it's Barbara. I just wondered if in all of this, including that board meeting, does anyone have a sense, are they actually planning to hire a president of the one community college, or are they just having the system office as it stands run the community colleges?
There was no discussion of that at the last meeting, at yesterday's meeting. And I don't see it in any of the charts that they have.
I haven't heard that there's any hiring committee or plan.
I mean, here you can see some of the org charts. They're really hard to see. This is the Human Relations Department, and it's all color-coded. Vice President of Human Resources. Then you have under that 5 directors, and then you have various staffs. It's all color-coded. This is the Finance and Infrastructure. Again, it's in the minutes of the board. Shared services or finances. And those were the ones that were made available at that meeting. This is all elaboration of the bureaucracy at the central level. So the question for us, of course, eventually is what is the relationship that we would like to see between what goes on at the central level or the system office level, if you please, what goes on in regions and what goes on locally. It's the whole balance between that, which is lacking certainly at this point. Are there any other questions about the board meeting? The next one is in May. That will be the last for the spring term, but I believe they continue over the summer. Okay.
Can I say, David, that last thing that you said, the question about the relationship that we'd like to see, I think is a really important question. And I think, we're seeing some response when there was no immediate response at the meeting, but there is an immediate sort of follow-up in terms of making sure that faculty get notified and so on. So if we could contribute something a little more substantive in terms of what we would like, I think we should think about moving in that direction over the course of the semester so that we can present something like that. Because this is all getting solidified. These jobs are getting, the whole structure is very quickly falling in place. So, yeah.
Right, and what we've noticed is that the system office budget, which doesn't even include many of the new positions which are in these org charts, is already up to about $40 million. And I think at least somebody pointed out, we'll have to double check, that's a larger budget than at least 3 of the community colleges.
Yeah, and
Yes.
it does, the introduction to it does clearly say that for the time being, it will expand the budget, but it's only temporary, until they don't have to simultaneously support 12 colleges and the 1 college. But it's not clear how that transition is really going to be made, because it seems like we need everything.
Okay, so we'll come back to that, and that's an issue for the report that we want to make to NESHE for their June meeting. And again, the President of the JACAN pointed out that the status report and implementation, 2-year implementation plan, which they had planned to present this month to NESHE, has been put off by NESHE, and this will go to the June meeting. So we have to make sure that at our May meeting, because there's a 30-day notice, that we have a text to approve that will contain our criticisms, but also our proposals. And I think there's no reason why we shouldn't have a counter proposal to some of the aspects of Students First, in particular the over-centralization and the elimination of the autonomy of the constituent campuses.
And I think also, Ms. Barbara, again, the question of governance of anything that happens at the formal governance process, shared governance at all.
Yes. Okay, are there other comments then on the board?
Well, I think, David, to follow up what you were saying in terms of the local governance, I think we need to ask NESHE how a community college can be defined as a community college if the community is not part of the equation. So that to me is critical. That centralization puts community, basically cuts it out of the equation of what these colleges are. So that's a problem.
Okay, well, this will be a big agenda item for our next meeting. Let's go on to item 6. And this was just a situation of the what's generally called the pass-fail. We've discussed that already to some extent under point 1 and also with Monica under point 2. Perhaps we can say a word about the situation at the universities as well. But let's have those who want to express themselves on the question of the pass-fail policies that are being implemented. Let's begin with the community colleges. Is there anything additional we want to say to what we said in point 1 with Terry? Or does that suffice for the community colleges?
Well, I think this is Ron. This is Ron again. Oh, sorry. Is there somebody else there?
No, go ahead, Ron. It's Barbara.
Okay, Barbara. This is Ron. Earlier this week, we received what we are told, I believe, is the final policy. I'm not 100% sure because we were told the last one was the final policy, and then it turned out that it was not. But we did receive what was called the final policy, and that we are not to share with students, and that they would have a rollout, and that students would be able to make requests via a portal in my ComNet, And if you read through the documentation that we received, this was passed out at the Dean's Council. If you look at that documentation, it is so intricate, you almost need a tax attorney to be able to advise students on it. It's that complicated. I had a faculty member contact me after I shared the documents with that faculty member, and he said he'd do a long algebraic quadratic equation and solve for X than advise using that policy, because it's next to impossible. Every student, it's almost like you have to tailor your recommendation to every individual student. That student can't stray from the path that they decide to go on without endangering their transfer. So it's a really problematic policy, and in most cases, students are probably going to be better off just taking the grade. That's what the conclusion was at my college.
Francone, Tunxus. Yeah, and this bears directly on the whole discussion of holistic case management, because this is precisely the problem. If the system office is rapidly, although I think for legitimate reasons, or coming up with a policy without properly thinking it through and then implementing it, it's going to be a disaster for every one of our students potentially, and that's not good.
Hi, it's Mike Emanuel from Northwestern.
Go ahead, Mike.
To Ron, to your point, I was having two simultaneous meetings here with our college president. From what we're being told at Northwestern, grades are going to be posted, and then students are going to have until June 1st of this year to decide whether they want to take the letter grade or the pass-fail. Now, I know it doesn't, right at this point, at this date in April, that doesn't help with the complications of trying to figure everything out there. But is that what everybody else is receiving, at least from the community college level, that they have until June 1st and wait until the grades get posted and then make a decision?
Yes,
I believe that is the case, Michael. This is Ron again. Again, the problem is that different courses have different prerequisite cutoffs. And so depending upon the course and the students taking, depending upon the course they want to take after that, also in terms of a W grade, financial aid plays a role in there. They could have their federal financial aid cut off if they take a W rather than the grade. In terms of transfer, depending upon the school they want to transfer from, they may be better off taking a grade than not taking a grade. And so it really is every single student would need to be advised to do something different. And so that's really the big problem. The grade doesn't matter. I mean, in terms of them getting the grade and being able to make the decision after the grade, that's secondary to making a decision that doesn't endanger their ability to transfer, that doesn't endanger their ability to apply for programs that lead to licensure, that doesn't endanger their ability to meet a prerequisite. There are so many issues involved in the determination of whether it's the right thing for a student to do, that it makes advising extremely challenging, to the point where particularly if adjunct faculty are being asked to help students make this decision, it's next to impossible.
And you have a withdrawal date of April 22 as well?
I thought they could choose the W up to June 1st. Like you said, I think any of those grades, I think they could switch it over to June 1st, but I'm not 100% sure on that. Maybe somebody else knows.
All right.
Hi, this is Mary Beth from Nantucket. I just wanted to let you know that the information that I got from my academic dean is using June 30th, not June 1st, as the date when students have until to decide to change to pass-fail. And I'm pretty sure that our withdraw date is May 8th, but I would have to look that one up for sure. But I did just look up the June 30th, and that's what I got. That's what I got from my dean about the pass-fail.
Francone, another unintended consequence that I'm anticipating is students that normally would withdraw that are on the borderline of passing, literally the course, a 60, are going to hang around. And if they fall a few points short of that 60, I could see those students taking some sort of action to argue the point that under the circumstances, they should be allowed to pass the course.
Did anyone, sorry, Colina, did anyone other than Gateway send recommendations that went through a governance process?
Kalina, this is Lois Amy, and I'm a little confused. We didn't even have any idea about recommendations, or were asked about recommendations, or nothing.
So is Colina again. So yeah, at Gateway, we just, I mean, the response after last meeting, our meeting was on the 4th and no, on the 3rd. And when Provost Gates got back to us on the 4th, we were told that the deadline was the 6th. And I know that that's the only information that I passed along to you because it was all quite, that date was new to me. It was a surprise. But Gateway went ahead and just sent recommendations anyway. And I was just wondering if anybody else did that or not. So it seems like no.
I would say no for Norwalk.
This is Ron. I sent out a request for feedback from faculty. We were told, we found out that we were allowed to get feedback, I think on Friday, Kalina, when you contacted us and said that, and showed us the letter that you received from the provost. And at that point, I contacted our dean, and we were told that we had until Wednesday of the following week to get feedback, which is certainly not enough time to go through a governance process. And so I just sent out an email to all faculty asking for feedback, and whatever feedback I got back from Wednesday, I sent to my dean, and she forwarded that to Ken, I believe. So that's how it worked at Noctic Valley.
Okay, let's perhaps just introduce a little bit about what's going on at the universities, which is quite different. The universities are not covered by a system-wide or a central system office directive about pass-fail. And I'll just speak for CCSU because I'm not sure exactly the details of what's going on at the others. But we had 2 Senate meetings just on this issue. We spent nearly 6 hours debating the question of what is the best pass-fail policy. And you have it here. I'm not going to go into the details, but we are allowing them to have pass-fail on individual courses in their major, their minor, or in gen ed, but with a series of qualifications. So the general policy is that they can, until May the 10th, apply. That is to say, before their final exams, before the final exam week, at the last day of class, which is May the 10th, they can apply for a pass-fail. There will, however, be a distinction between those students who receive a grade of C- or higher. They will get, and now I've got to make sure that I have it correct, a P cap or P caret. And those who get a grade of D will get a P star notation, which will not fulfill requirements for prerequisites or continuation in a particular program if that was required. But there are also programs such as nursing, which requirement listed here in the considerations, engineering as well, and business and education have a 2.7 GPA requirement in order to enter their program at the junior level. So I have to say, we had a meeting of almost 80 people, and we debated a series of 9 different resolutions and had a vote on all of them, each and every one of them. And so whatever the policy we decided, and here it is, that's pretty clear to the faculty and is based on our decision as what is best given the programs that we have and given our students. So I think there's a model there. I know that Southern and Western and Eastern came up with their own decisions. I imagine that there's something pretty common to all of them. And I certainly don't begrudge the system office or the board the responsibility is to send out a guideline saying the various institutions should come up with a policy on pass-fail given the current crisis. That's different, however, from formulating at the system office a policy without taking into account the input from faculty and from the individual campuses. So that's a CCSU policy. What about Southern? Mike, are you there still?
Yeah, I'm here. Well, I think I reported on that last time. It's very similar to what Central did. It was a little less so. We didn't have a distinction between a C, it's either pass or fail, not the C plus, C minus thing or D. But very similar, yeah, in the sense that we had a Senate meeting, debated it, and came up with what we thought worked for our students. And I think I mentioned that they have to get approval from their advisor, so that the person doesn't make a bad choice the student doesn't make a bad choice without knowing the consequences. And then the chair of the department that's teaching the class also has to sign on it. So we've just tried to build in some checks and balances so the students wouldn't make any rash or poor decisions for themselves. But yeah, the point is the same, David, that was our decision.
Right. And that's, so in other words, we want to have as a general guideline that we will have a pass-fail policy at each of the institutions. But then it's up to each institution based on its particular programs that it has and how the faculty are discuss the matter to come up with a policy. And the advantage is now it's pretty clear to everybody at CCSU, and I suspect at Southern as well, and at Eastern and Western, what that policy is. And that's a big advantage for people being able to be consulted and to correctly inform the students. So there's an example of combining a central guideline with local autonomy in making the decision. And I think that's perhaps something of a model. Any other comments about the pass-fail? Let's go on then to 7, preparation for FAC filing to June NESHE meeting on student first presentation by the board. We talked about this last week. Kalina, do you want to just refresh our memory? We had a committee set up.
Yeah, so we should be finalizing what will be sent to NECHI by our next meeting. So at the moment, it consists of just sort of a statement of what faculty we're doing and why. That will be centered around that mirror article, Good Faith and Community College, and will include all of the resolutions and so on that followed it. So I guess this is a good time to ask what else should be included. At the moment, I think it's me, David, and Paul working on this. Anybody else wants to join?
Kalina, this is Ron. I think I was listed in the minutes as working on it. I'm happy to work on it. I don't have the time to to do the initial draft, but I'm certainly very, very happy to look through drafts and provide feedback and commentary and to help with revisions and things like that. Very happy to do that.
Great.
Yeah, I think it was Ron originally rather than me.
Okay.
All right, and I think we added today, although probably it's already in your document, the relationship between the central, regional, and local instances or authorities. I think that's an important point to add. Is there anything else? So we should have a draft circulated before our next meeting, so that at the next, say a week before with the agenda, so that we can approve something at our next meeting, which is in May. Offhand, I don't have the exact date, but so we should work on that and make sure that this is ready for final approval with any amendments at our May meeting or submission to NESHE.
Fran Cohen, I just want to thank the members of that subcommittee for finding the time to do this work. It's important. I appreciate it.
Any other discussion? We'll have plenty of discussion in May then. All right, online courses. There's obviously the move to our universal shift to remote teaching. And I think the terminology now being used is online teaching, which has resulted from the coronavirus crisis. We're terming as remote teaching. There's also a system level remote learning task force, about which I don't think I have any further information. And there's also a separate CSCU online learning working group, of which I apparently am a member, about which I can say something in a moment. But are there issues that we want to bring up about remote teaching? I know it's been a considerable burden on faculty, but it's also pretty clear that faculty are rising to the occasion and providing at least some form of remote learning for all their students.
This is Mike Shea from Southern. I just want to make sure that we have some input that talks about class size, especially for 100 and 200 level courses, if there's going to be kind of a policy about remote learning. You know, the students are weaker, less, you know, they need more attention, especially if you're teaching kind of a skills course, as opposed to just, you know, transferring information to a bunch of people. I mean, I think all of us are often teaching skills, but some are more, some courses like freshman composition or whatever are more intense with that. And I just think we should, you know, cap it. You know, we should make sure that the courses are capped at lower numbers than they are for the on ground of the same type of course. So, you know, the freshman cap classes or freshman comp classes in some of the community colleges are 28. It's way too high for on ground, but certainly if you're going to do it online, I think they should always be, you know, below that number. So for skills courses, I would argue that we try to get whatever body creates this, I don't know if it's a policy or guidelines, that be part of it, that 100 and 200 level courses in particular be capped at very low numbers. So it's not the remote learning should not be a money-saving device. It should be a pedagogical success device.
Of course, the $24 question is, will we be still doing remote learning in the fall? And I don't know that any of us have an answer to that.
Well, what I meant, David, before, let me just say, Barbara, I just meant no matter what, David, I sort of meant, I agree that that's a big question, and I think what I'm saying should apply to that, but I'm also saying any long-term plans to have system-wide remote learning should somehow involve some distinction among course and class sizes. That's all. Thanks.
Good.
Barbara, I'm sorry.
I'm finding myself in a very odd position thinking about this online question because, number one, I think it is true what people were saying earlier about the students need to know, and so do we in terms of preparation. We should not find out at the last minute that we're going online when we prepared everything to be in class. But the big thing for me is I've been reading since early January every single live update from The Guardian and CNN about this virus, and I no way think it's safe to go back in the fall, and especially all the people we have with vulnerable conditions of all kinds. I just don't think it's safe. So I don't like online. I didn't want to teach online, but now I really want to in the fall. Not as a special favor or anything like that, but that we're going to have cases. We're going to be a place. It's like going to be like a cruise ship. You know, we'll have cases, and the question is, where's the cluster? And it's very weird for me to be saying, let's stay online, and let's say so early rather than wait till the last minute, because I don't like online. But it is what it is.
This is Ron at Naugatuck Valley. The biggest challenge for us has been with the science faculty concerned about online labs and not having online labs. There was a policy that did come down from the system office regarding online summer science courses and having the lecture come first, and then a 1-credit lab starting August 1st. Our science faculty accept that. They do think that pedagogically it would be better for the labs to be tied to lectures. But given the circumstances, they are okay with separating it out and having the labs be done in August. In terms of the fall, again, there's very little support among the science faculty for online labs. They don't think it's possible for students to meet all the learning outcomes that are lab related with an online lab. So that's where our science faculty stand at Naugatuck Valley.
I just wanted to give an update about Three Rivers. So for my particular classes, I'm in charge of the developmental program, and there's a lot of concern about whether developmental classes will run in an online form. So one of the things we're doing at our college is we're creating an online course for developmental for fall for English 096. And we're doing it in 2 ways. One is fully online, and then we're also using the same materials to develop the on-ground version of the course. So if we're in for a while and we have to move to online, we can just train the students on how to do the online work in the first few weeks of the semester, and then switch to doing distance learning. But some of the challenges have been, for example, I can't get a computer from my campus for me to use. So I'm going to have to buy a laptop. Right now I'm working off of a 10-year-old iPad that doesn't have a keyboard. And my husband needs his device. I'm homeschooling my kids. So it's been really a challenge to have the technology that I need to even build the course in anticipation of that. Also, the publishers have these ridiculous deadlines. I had to get my ebook chosen by April 15th so that I could customize it. And it has to be fully customized by July for me to be able to train the faculty who are going to teach the course. So I just think it's really tricky because we're in a position where if we do want to plan, we have to plan early and often while we're also trying to teach these classes and do advising, and it's overwhelming. So I think there's the technology piece and, access to the computers for the teacher. And I'm also just not sure that there's going to be the support available to the lowest level performing students to negotiate this early on. I just want to kind of throw out there as sort of where we are with things, because I think sometimes the developmental population is overlooked.
Okay, good point. We'll obviously come back to this again. I should just add, there's also a working group distinct from the remote learning task force, looking at online teaching and programs. I somehow had my name put onto that by the local administration at CCSU. And I'm rather wary about the whole thing because I've participated in the past on system-wide online learning. David Stoloff, I recall that we spent some time together on an e-learning committee. And it's all I can say based on the meeting which I just recently attended is that apparently sometime in the summer, the system office outsourced to some consultants to prepare a presentation on programs that could be put online through the community colleges and the universities at the associate, the undergraduate, and the graduate levels. And as expected, we got to see 23 PowerPoint slides comparing Connecticut with the region, but the region included not just New England, but New York as well. It was what you would expect of these kinds of meetings with a consultant whose only information, this was somebody either in North Washington or North Toronto, and I couldn't quite figure out which one it was, who had no knowledge whatever of any of the institutions in Connecticut, and who came up with an analysis which those few people who were teaching faculty on this working group immediately demurred from. I don't know if I can show you this. Just take a second. put on the screen. For those of you who can see it, we have a so-called quadrant analysis here, for example, of master's degrees programs, right? With the usual high, low, high, low, low, high, low, high, etc. The ones that were supposedly here in Connecticut, I mean, I know that, for example, at CCSU, we have a data mining program, which is completely online, and an international MBA. They're not even listed here. At Southern, Mike, what are your online programs? Is it just library science, or are there others?
You know, I'm not sure, David. If you mean
completely online, fully online.
Not sure which ones we have only online. There are some that I know that are available both, you know, kind of online and on ground. I'm sorry, I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay. Well, apparently neither do the consultants.
David,
Paid a lot. Yes,
pardon me,
Noel?
David.
Yes.
What does that mean? We have an educational technology program that's online at Eastern. What does that mean when it's in that quadrant?
That quadrant was the to the right is high demand but low supply. Right? And so education leadership is over here. I don't know how they came up with these numbers, but there you are. There's your program. So it is represented. So it is high demand but low supply.
What's the supply of students? What does that mean?
We have no idea. I'm just giving an offhand report. Are there any other completely online programs at Eastern?
No, it's the only one, and it's it's been for 20 years, and our administration doesn't advertise it, so we have very few students.
Right. Well, and here is what the recommendations they made. These were the programs they recommended, at least initially, to be put fully online. For example, at the associate's level, nursing, and there was objections to that on the grounds that you would most want a hybrid program for nurses. You do want the nurses to have some on ground and direct experience. But this is still at a very preliminary stage. I'm just making a brief report on it. I don't have much hope for this, and I believe that only 2 of the universities are participating, Central and one other. I predict that this is not going to be particularly successful unless it is decentralized and the universities look at what they're doing, and separately the community colleges look what they're doing. It's very hard to discuss all of that together with only some of the community colleges represented and some of the universities. So again, we'll come back on the online courses at the next meeting. There's always.
Pardon me, David. Are you involved with the selection of the platform?
No, that's yet another group.
There were 80 people that were involved, and there was a lot of discussion via email among the group. There are 3 contenders: Blackboard, Canvas, and some other contender that I can't remember the name because I dismissed it. And there was a big discussion about, does it make sense to change the online platform when we're in the mid of a crisis? And then most everyone's using Blackboard now.
Yeah, I mean, I know that the last time this came up, there also was a huge committee, and in fact, Blackboard turned out to be the answer because we're already using it. So I have a feeling that's going to be the answer again. By the way, I just mentioned that at Central, we do have an alternative for on-ground classes that want to have a web supplement. We use Blackboard for online classes during the summer, but we've been using Moodle, which is an open source, entirely free, and quite effective course management system. We've been using it since 2007. We've been using it now for 13 years with over 500 sections.
I'm sorry, I missed what the name of the platform was.
Moodle, Moodle.
Okay, thank you.
You can download it and run it on your desktop. It's a open source, designed for academic uses. It's certainly equivalent to Blackboard. In some respects, a little better. In some respects, perhaps Blackboard might have an advantage, but overall, about the same. The big difference is rather than costing tens of millions of dollars a year system-wide, if implemented institution by institution, it would cost, in terms of software, nothing. So you might want to check it out. Okay, students first. Our last item on our agenda, the general
David?
education update. Yes.
One moment. It's Kalina, sorry. Just before we move on, I wanted to pop back for a second to the task force. And a lot of the things that were mentioned today, I'm kind of feeling like maybe we should have something to say, in terms of the class size, in terms of, what Barbara mentioned that I didn't even think about before, that even if we can go back, there will be some members of faculty who may not feel comfortable going back. There's, what Jen mentioned, like, if I remember correctly,
Sorry, we just lost you there.
oh, sorry, there was a call coming in. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so I believe when we looked at the membership of that group, I think there was one member of faculty. So I'm fairly sure that the group making decisions about how we should move forward in this whole COVID era is not getting the benefit of this conversation. And it's not really our burden, but clearly the system just really does not have an adequate structure to get proper faculty input at this moment, right? Anyone have any thoughts about how we might at least forward some of these thoughts or request input, some way of making sure, because these decisions are going to be made in the next month or so. Do you see any avenue for us to participate in this or at least provide input?
This is Mary Beth. Could we possibly ask somebody from that committee to come to our next meeting if there's the chair or the representative, so we could share our concerns? I don't know if that's too late though.
Yeah, so I was thinking along those lines too. I think that's a great idea, but I was kind of kicking myself because I'm like, it should have been this meeting. But I think last time we also didn't realize that they would be receptive to getting our input in this way. So, I mean, at the very least, that might be something.
So we could certainly, on the basis of our discussion today, send an email to the chair of that committee and ask for an update, which we would circulate by email to all the members of the FAC. We can do that immediately upon receipt of information.
This is Jen Long. I think that's a great idea.
That's not concern. I mean, I think it's a positive thing that the management, the enrollment management crisis team came to this meeting. So I do congratulate Terry Raimondi for doing that. But we haven't had a similar offer from the remote learning, and I think we should point that out.
That sounds good.
Are there issues besides the question of minimum class size that we want to bring up?
Well, I think the issue of safety that Barbara was bringing up, I mean, that's not directly connected to remote learning, but it's connected to returning in the fall.
Yes.
So I think we should bring that up too. It's Mike Shea.
And Cone, I would think the unions would have a lot to say about this also. And based on some of the communications from the 4Cs recently, that seems to be very much on their minds. They should be weighing in to give faculty some options here if faculty want those options, assuming we're back on campus. For those faculty who don't feel comfortable, I would think they should have the option of remaining off campus and doing their work elsewhere.
And this is Ron. I guess the question I have is how do we address population of students who basically don't know how to do college, and now they don't even have the benefit of face-to-face faculty to sort of motivate them to remain accountable. Many of my students who are not doing well online have contacted me and told me that they can't do online because they need to have that faculty presence in their lives that face-to-face presence, okay, to because at least now in their lives they lack that self-motivation. And they recognize that. They know what their flaw. They know it's a flaw. Okay, but it's still something that they need to work on. And in the process of dumping them online, it makes it very difficult on them. They can do the work, but they need to have someone there cheering them on. They need to have someone there holding their hand. And that tends to be students at the 100 level and at the developmental level, as Jennifer pointed out too. And so what do we do about them? And one possibility that I don't know if anyone's discussed is having accelerated semesters, so that if we are allowed to go back, and should the virus reappear later in the semester, that there's a better chance of us having courses finished earlier than having to split the semester in half again. So that's just one idea I have, because there are many students that we have students who have really messy home lives, and it's next to impossible for them to do work from home. And so we also have students whose families actually, my daughter, who goes to who's a junior at a university, her roommate, her parents see her studying for a test, and they say to her, "You're not doing anything. If you're not going to do anything, you got to do the dishes." And she said, "Well, I'm studying for a test." And they, again, not every parent, especially if it's first-time students, recognize what it takes to be successful in college, and they may be hindering their son or daughter or family members' ability to perform remotely. And so this is something that needs to be discussed as well. What do we do for those students, particularly at the community college, where this really is a big issue for our students?
This is Mike Shea. I agree with what Ron is saying. I also think we have good students who don't want online. All sorts of students, good and weak students. And I think we've got to be really careful about providing online for people who want it, but and not cross over the line where students who don't want it, kind of the only thing they can do is take it online. I mean, our students aren't stupid. They know that they want, a college experience. One thing I think we should also keep in mind ourselves, and perhaps bring up to that committee, is this, this financial situation. It's going to close a lot of those non-selective liberal arts colleges. They're going to close. There's no way they have the money to do this. So there's going to be more faculty out there, but there's also going to be more students out there from those colleges. And I think if Connecticut were smart, the thing they would do right now is invest in public higher ed so that we could make public higher ed cheaper for our students. I know they're worried about student enrollment, but I think we're going to get some of those students. Also, there are going to be families who can't afford to send their students to colleges that cost more. They had the money for it last year, but not in the future. So I think there are going to be more students now in the fall and the following couple of years than there have been in the past, because I think there's going to be a lot less competition, few places for them to go. So I don't think we should I think we want to push back against the notion that we're not in the same place we were before the pandemic happened. I mean, in some ways we're worse off financially, but in some ways the state, if it invested in public higher ed, could profit from that by getting more students and subsidizing them more, so that it doesn't cost as much to go here, and there should be plenty of students. I just think we need to, plant that seed in somebody's head, because I think this is kind of an advantage for public higher ed if they don't cut, if they see it as a time when perhaps it might be smart to invest in public higher ed.
Well, okay, we'll go ahead and contact the members of that task force and share some of these concerns with them. We can do that, by Monday, and get back to everybody before the next meeting, as soon as we have a response from them. Part of the question, of course, is what's going to happen in the fall, and that's going to be, I think, to a large extent decided by the governor and by the regional governors, and by the course of the virus itself. So that we can't at this point predict, but we can certainly foresee some of the problems as have just been mentioned and a number of other people have brought up as well. Is there more discussion on online courses? If not, let's go on to the last.
Now, Dave, I just have one comment that I think if we're inviting, this is Lois Amy, I think if we're inviting somebody from that committee to come to the meeting, I think we should ask them what exactly they are doing, to give us maybe a summary of what it is they're looking at, talking about, and just in general doing.
Yes, that's definitely the question we're going to ask them as of Monday. And we will communicate back with everybody on the faculty advisory committee next week once we get a response. And we'll do that even before the next meeting so we can be well prepared. Thanks.
Okay, and I have one more, and it's off the topic completely. For the minutes that I'm going to be doing, there was somebody on as a participant. His name was Marvin Wilson, and he was on for the whole meeting up until about 25 minutes ago. Does anybody know who that is?
Yes, this is Mike Shea. I know who. Marvin comes from Southern, and he represents.
He's the alternate. This is Myrna Garcia Bowen. He's the alternate for SWOF, CSU SWOF.
Right.
Okay. All right. I didn't know that. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Let's go on then to item 9, Students First, General Education Update. Is there someone who would like to take the lead on that particular issue?
Is anyone aware of what's going on with Gen Ed? I'm not. This is Kalina.
This is Ron. I have an update from the Dean's Council. I think it was the Dean's Council where Mike Stefanowicz presented the Gen Ed. I was on that committee until I withdrew from that committee, resigned from that committee. Mike presented the results of the elections. He claimed that all of the votes, that there were 9 that voted, there were 2 that voted in favor, Quinnebog and Middlesex. There was 1 that voted against, that was Norwalk. And then he said that there were 9 who voted not to vote, which he defined as an abstention. And so he is forwarding that those vote totals to the BOR as 2 for, 1 against, and 9 abstentions. There were deans, I believe, at the council who said that was a misrepresentation of what those votes meant, but he disagreed. So that's the update that I received.
There was a vote on, this is Jen Long, there was a vote on the Three Rivers campus that wasn't captured in that as well. That someone from my campus told me this morning that was a concern. So I think is that what you're getting at about the misrepresentation, that everything wasn't captured?
The misrepresentation is that these were abstentions. In other words, that we chose not to take a stand on the Gen Ed. The reason for the resolutions against voting was because the process was not transparent and the process was not a form of shared governance, and therefore the entire vote was illegitimate. So to then claim that those votes will be included as abstentions in an illegitimate process is disingenuous.
Well, Fran Cone. Go ahead, Barbara. Lois,
No,
go
Lois.
ahead. Go ahead, Lois.
All right. So I had, if this has changed, I'm a little concerned. But I had a person who was at the meeting, at a Gen Ed meeting as just an observer, said that they, because they couldn't figure out what they were going to do about these so-called abstentions, that this was going to go back to the SFASA FACC Sassafras Committee, who is supposed to be meeting next Friday, I understand it. So the fact that they're now saying that it's going to the BOR is something new.
Lois, I may have, that may be a confusion on my part. And now that you say that, I can't remember whether I was told the BOR or the Sassafras Committee. It may have been one or the other. I don't actually remember. So you may be correct.
Yeah, and I know when it was brought up at the Academic Dean's Council, there was some pushback by some people about how those votes were being interpreted. So I don't know that it went anywhere, but at least it was recorded that there was some pushback.
Okay, is there any other discussion?
Well, the only thing I would add, this is Ron again, is that as we work on that letter for Netchi, we need to be very clear as to the meaning of these votes, and that our interpretation is that they are not abstentions, that they are calling into question the meaning of all of the votes that were taken, or all the attempts at voting that were taken for this particular curriculum. That these are not abstentions because they were a rejection of the entire voting process, and I think that needs to be made clear to Netchi, because that's going to be a very, very large difference of opinion between the faculty and FAC and the administration.
This is Colina, and
I agree with Ron.
Go ahead, Lois.
Okay, I agree with Ron. I think we have to, in the letter to Netchi, we have to question the legitimacy of the whole process.
So this is Colina. I'm just very glad that we made available to the board yesterday and to the public yesterday every single resolution, because I think the resolutions very clearly indicate that the reason for non-participation is the fact that they don't believe the process to be legitimate. So to have that interpreted as participation in the very process they reject is just nonsensical. And those resolutions are there if necessary.
Do you think that a resolution on our part to that effect is required? Or should we simply communicate it?
This is Colina again. I would wait to see what happens with this. If it goes to SFA, SACC, Sassafras, if it goes to the BOR, we are there to direct their attention to. I mean, I think I think it's ridiculous to take seriously the notion that this could be understood as participation in a process as a result of a resolution of non-participation.
Fran Cone, I agree with Kalena.
Yeah, very well put, Kalena.
Yeah, if it goes forward to the BOR, then there can be no better proof that this is an illegitimate process. That would be yet more proof of it. But if it is sent back to the FASACC, then I think we have to wait to see what that leads to.
That's good. All right, so we're forewarned, and we'll be looking for that on the agenda of the next Board of Regents meeting, or finding out whether it's been gone to the, I like the terminology, Sassafras Committee.
Well, I think everybody should understand that the Sassafras Committee is meeting next Friday, the 24th. So we should follow up with that.
Colina, you have a good formulation. I think we should communicate with the chair of that committee.
Sure.
Okay. Are there any other comments about the general education issue? If not, we have arrived at point 10 of our agenda, to wit.
May I
David, this
One of my favorite moments.
This is Mike
Next
Shea. I
meeting-
just want to confirm when our next meeting is.
Yes, I was about to say that, May 10th.
Thank you.
Okay.
Let me just double check, in fact. No, I'm sorry. I've got that wrong. May 15th. The board is meeting on the 14th. And the faculty advisory is on the 15th. All right, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
That's Francis? Yeah.
Yes.
Second.
Robin? Okay. Those in favor? Adjourning to May
Aye.
15th.
Aye.
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 Bye.
Opposed? Who, if you're opposed, I think you just have to stay online and that's all we can do. I'm not. The majority has it. We are adjourned until May the 15th. Thank you very much, everybody. And thank you to
Thank you.
Terry Mandy and Monica Maldonado for participating as well.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye.
Aye.
Be well.
Oh, there's David.
Bye.